Hi, welcome. My name is Natalie Harrington, and I serve as the Director of Student Learning and Career Development here at Cuyahoga Community College. And today we're going to be talking about all things interview. How do you nail that professional interview, whether that's in person, whether that's virtually? How should you prepare? How should you follow up? We're going to talk about all of those things. So if you're somebody that likes to take physical notes, get something out to take those on with a pen and a trusty piece of paper, or if you like to type them and you've got multiple screens, that's great too. You'll always have this video to go back and reference as well. So let's dive right in. Today, we're going to cover four general areas about interviewing. The first is types of interviews. There are all kinds of different ways you can be interviewed, and the recruiter can find out what kind of candidate you are. Sometimes that's not even with you talking or interacting with a person. So, we're going to talk about that. How do you prepare for those interviews? How do you navigate the interview setting itself? And then, what does the follow up look like that's really going to set you apart as a candidate? So, first, let's dive in and talk about the types of interviews. There's kind of three larger categories. The first is phone screening, the second is virtual, the third is in person. And there are variations to each one of those different areas. So for phone screening, I kind of look at the advantages and disadvantages, right? When it's a phone screen, they can't see you. All they can do is hear your voice. So that allows you the capability to set things out in front of you, to have your resources if you need to refer to them. You could have screens up with resources to help you pull in information. But the downside is you aren't able to interact or feed off of those visual cues that you would otherwise see in a virtual or in person interview. So sometimes they can be a little bit challenging. The second type of interview, that virtual interview, there's synchronous and asynchronous, and we're seeing a lot of varieties of these pop up. So similar to like a synchronous class that you would be in here at Tri-C, you would use that and have the interview happening at the exact same time. That might be through a Zoom meeting, that might be through a WebEx meeting, and the interviewer is live, asking you the questions, you're responding. An asynchronous virtual meeting could look like the employer sends you a link in an email, and through that link, it opens up a parameter setting that is timed with a certain amount of questions. And for each question, you get a couple of tries to respond, record your answer, and then send those over. Also, recently, we've started to see employers utilizing chatbots. So this means that chatbot is going to ask you a question. You're going to respond verbally to that question, and that chatbot is going to be trained to ask you follow-up questions about the answer that you gave. And so we really have to just be prepared overall and able to flex throughout those different types of settings. The last one is the one that most people are most familiar with, and I'm not going to say the most comfortable with, because any type of setting for interviewing, it brings some anxiety on. Even as somebody that has coached for folks to prepare for interviews for a very long time, if I'm in the interview, that hot seat myself, I still get those butterflies. I still get that anxiety, and that's very normal. So that's something that's important for you to understand. But preparing well is going to help reduce some of that anxiety. So some of those interview settings for in person could still look different. You might have a one on one interview where it's just you and the recruiter or the person doing the hiring. There might be a panel interview. And in a panel setting, that is where you have multiple people who are all taking round robin turns asking you questions and you're responding to them. A pro tip for a panel interview is you want to make sure, even though one person has asked you the question, that you are using your eye contact and directing your response around the room. The third is a presentation, and sometimes the presentation is embedded in those first two types of in-person interviews. It could be a presentation that you're just giving to one person. It could be a presentation that you're giving to a panel. But typically that search committee will ask you ahead of time when they are scheduling the interview and let you know what they want the presentation topic to be. You'll be required to research, develop a virtual presentation or visual presentation, and then present that during the meeting. And then the last is a group interview. So there could be multiple people leading the interview and asking the questions, but typically a group interview is with multiple candidates in one room. So you have to be really careful about not only how are you responding to those questions that the interviewer asks you, but how are you interacting with the other folks in that room. They're looking to see, do you take up all of the space for answering questions? Do you step back and allow other people's to answer? Are you able to build off of the responses that other people have or give them positive feedback based on their responses? They're looking for your verbal cues, but also your nonverbal cues and how you are opening up yourself and presenting yourself in that interview setting with multiple people. Does it make you nervous to interact with them? They are looking at all of those things. So it's really important for you as the interviewee, when somebody calls to set up that interview, that you ask the clarifying questions that you need to know how best to prepare and envision what that interview is going to look like. It is completely appropriate to ask how many folks will be in the interview itself. It's appropriate to ask if um, they would like you to be prepared to do anything special during the interview, such as a presentation. You can ask all those questions to help you understand and really feel more confident walking in. Okay, so that's types of interviews. Let's talk about what it even looks like. What is the interviewer trying to do? What's their role in that situation during the interview? So the very first thing is they're really trying to evaluate your skills and understand what your capability is in the job that they have. They are trying to envision as you are responding to the questions that they have. That might have been a completely different setting where you were doing that work. They're trying to see how would that translate over to their setting. They're imagining their teammates and how they might interact with you. So that's the very first thing. The second, it's their job to provide the position and company related information that you need to understand whether you're a good fit or not. The third is their goal is to create a positive image of the company. So the information that they're sharing with you is very much going to be all on the front end positive. So you may have to ask some follow up questions at the end of the interview to dig a little bit deeper than that surface that they are there to specifically provide. The fourth is they're really trying to decide how are you specifically, your skill set, your experiences, your personality going to contribute to the team and company? And would you fit with the other folks that they already have? As a hiring manager myself, I think about that constantly. You may have excellent experience, but if you don't bring that aura, that persona, that vibe that a recruiter is looking for to make sure that that is going to match well with the team that they have, you may just not be the right fit. And so they're really looking for whether you have the position related skills for the requirement, if you've got the transferable skills and that personality piece. Now, I've heard it said right when I started in higher education about 10 years ago, they would go, Natalie, if they don't, if the recruiter, when I say that, that's what I mean, if the person interviewing you doesn't want to spend time with you, hang out with you after that interview is over, you're probably not going to be the right person for that job. We spend so much of our time in the work setting. That hiring manager, their goal is to bring somebody in that can do the job but create a positive environment for the rest of their team. They want their team to want to come to work. So that's something that's not always communicated, but I want you to know that on the back end. All right, let's talk about how to prepare. So these are the questions I get all the time. How do you prepare for an interview? What steps should I be taking? What type of research should I be doing? Who should I be talking with? What have you heard about? Fill in the blank. So we're going to talk about those things. So first, I'm going to say, in preparation, you need to do your homework. Please don't walk in blind to the interview, not knowing anything about the company, maybe not even knowing anything about the person you're interviewing with. There are opportunities to do this research. And so the very first pro tip I'm going to give you as you're doing your homework actually becomes before you do your homework, and that's when you apply for a position. This happens so frequently where I'm working with folks, they're going online to apply. They submit their application, and they're doing that a lot for a lot of different positions. And then they get a call for an interview. and they go, I don't even remember that position. I don't know what the job description was. I just don't remember that. So, whenever you apply for a position, you need to save the job description as a PDF on your computer. I would save it with the company name and the job title and maybe the date that you applied. So, you've got that as a quick reference as you're going through your files because you're going to utilize that to prepare. And we're going to talk about how you can use that, but you need it for reference. You need to know what the job is that you're walking into the interview for. The second piece is you need to know your own resume, which means you need to review your resume. You need to be very familiar with what's included. And then you need to do the research on the company. So, one of the recruiters that we work with a lot is Sherwin-Williams, and they'll often say, when I talk to a student, they better know more about Sherwin-Williams as a company besides we make paint. Did you know Sherwin-Williams has a color of the year? The color of the year always changes. Do you know they have an intensive internship program and opportunity for advancement in the company? Did you know they have locations across the nation, but they've got X amount in the Cleveland area? You need to know those things. And so you can do that by going on their website. You can look at their social media. You can look at their strategic plan if they have that posted. You can look at news articles, but you really need to be familiar with what that company is, what do they do, and what do they have going on. It's very important. You need to show them that you are specifically interested in that job by doing that research. And then reach out to your network. So when we go back to the who should I be talking to question, your network is anybody that you know that is either connected directly to that company. Maybe they've worked there, maybe they've done an internship in the past, maybe they currently work there, or that knows somebody that is. So your network is this web. You have these first person interactions, but those first person interactions are connected to these second people. And so if you know somebody that knows somebody, you still need to reach out and say, you know what, can you connect me? I know that you are connected to this person that works at X company. Could you make an introduction for me so I can ask them some questions and learn a little bit more? And a great way to do that is through LinkedIn. That is the personal, professional social media that allows you to visually see those connections and then make that outreach. And then last, research who's interviewing you. So very frequently, an employer, when they call to set up an interview, they'll send you a follow-up calendar invitation or an email that lists out who is going to be involved in that interview. And so from there, you're able, again, to go into LinkedIn and look at what is the work history of that person? How long have they been at the organization? Have they held different roles there? What does their background look like? Or what are things that you could make connections with them in a personal, professional way? Maybe in their LinkedIn profile, they posted they went out and they volunteered at a local organization and you've also been there or you have connected with them in some way. Those are the things that you want to know that creates that personality, that connection, that vibe, if you will, that makes them feel like you would be a good fit for their team. So next we're going to talk about mapping out your route. And you can map out your route, whether this is a phone interview, whether it's a virtual interview, whether it's an in-person interview, and each one of those looks a little bit different. So you have to remember that when you're on the phone, good reception is really important. You don't want to take an interview when you're in a busy setting and step into a staircase where it's quieter and then have no reception and drop the call. You really want to be intentional and cognizant about where you're going to take that phone call from for the interview. You want to make sure your phone is fully charged. So important. We get going every single day. Then you might be out and come home and realize, oh my gosh, I only have 15%. Make sure you get plugged in that you've got good charge for that interview. It is helpful if you use a headset if it's got good connection and you know it's really clear on the other side. I would never recommend taking your phone call for your interview and using a speaker phone. So you really want it to be as clear and crisp as possible. If you have a headset that allows you to do that, that can be a helpful tool. And then also, you want to notify your housemates or family of your interview if you're taking that call from home. They may not know. They may walk through the door and they may be, hey, Natalie, what's going on over there? And here I am on the phone call with an employer and they can hear everything. You really want to make sure that it sounds nice and quiet in the background. You're not going to get interrupted. You let them know what's happening so that they can be respectful of that. I don't know about you, but we have pets in the home, and so my dogs are on high alert all the time. If there's a squirrel outside, I'm going to know about it. And so I need to make sure I'm in a location where even if they react to something, that is not going to come through or deter our phone call. So let's talk about mapping your route when it's virtual. This looks a little bit different because you are going to be interacting with a virtual platform. So you want to make sure that you have that downloaded on your technology, that you're ready. I would recommend having a backup. So interviewing virtually from your computer is highly recommended. It's going to give you the clearest picture and image and vocalization. But I would have whatever app that is that you're doing your virtual interview from already also downloaded on your phone and the information located there so that you can quickly access in. Let's say that your phone dies, or I'm sorry, your computer dies because you lose internet access. You can hop into your phone and maybe then you've got the virtual access that you can hop back in. And so I always like to say in a virtual interview, I am so excited to be meeting with you. I just want to let you know if for some reason we're cut off for any reason, I'm going to hop back in and I'm prepared to do that through my phone. That just shows an extra level of preparation. It really speaks to who you are as a candidate. So taking that time to be prepared as possible, really important. Again, being able to utilize headphones or a headset if it's virtual to keep it clear. Make sure your device is fully charged. You want to set up the device on a table instead of using your laptop or phone if you have one. You just really want to be able to have the clearest picture possible, and trying that out is important. You want to prepare the environment. So make sure that lighting is always coming from the front and you don't have backlighting. Your image is going to look so much better. Do a test run with your family or friends. Have them log in so you can check it out. Again, make sure the folks in your home know what's going on and that you have an interview that you can't be interrupted by. You want to close those unnecessary browsers. How many times do we get going in a day? We have 23 different tabs open. Really want to make sure it is limited to only the information that you need. And then with the login for the virtual, you can log in ahead of time, but don't want to log in too far in advance. So I would say 15 minutes, 20 minutes just to check to make sure. Make sure though that you sign back out after that. You don't want to sit in the room for 15 minutes. You want to just go ahead and double check and then log back in, I would say 5 minutes prior to the start of your interview when everybody is going to be ready to go. And then also, last tip, ask for a secondary phone number in case of difficulties. You might still have the login information from your phone to hop back in, but having that phone number so that you can call and let them know is a pro tip for sure. So, mapping your route virtually also. There is a video component that you want to be aware of, and that is, how do you look in the screen? So, on the left-hand side, you can see the image of the person doing the interview is like tucked down in the corner. The one on the right-hand side is, I'm looking up that person's nose. I don't want that. And the one on the bottom of your screen really shows you want to be centered. You want to have that good lighting. It is really important how you're perceived through that. Lastly, let's talk about mapping your route if it's in person. So use your GPS and do a dry run of that route and make sure that you do it at the same time that your interview will be happening. Because if you go on MapQuest or you go on Waze and you put the address in at 11 p.m. at night, but you need to be at your interview by 8 a.m. in the morning, that is going to look completely different in the land of commuting and how much time it's going to take. So check out what that route looks like, same time, same day that you will be doing it. And I would really encourage you doing a dry run, which means get in your car and drive to the location. You don't need to go inside, but go at least to the parking lot so that you're aware of where you're going. That way, it also gives you an opportunity to confirm the building entrance. You want to plan to arrive about 20 minutes early on the day of your interview. And when you pull in the parking lot, that is where your interview begins. I've even talked to employers that say they have somebody on their staff kind of watch as the person gets out of their car. How disheveled are they? Or How planned are they? How put together? Do they take their suit jacket? Is it on a hanger in the back of the car? That they open up the back door, they put their suit jacket on, they grab their items, and they walk in a calm, professional manner? Or are they scrambling? Are they sitting in their front seat, like digging through the things in their car? You don't want to do that. You want to make sure that you look professional from the moment you pull in that parking lot. I've talked to people that said their candidate pulled in music blaring into the parking lot. And all of those things really convey a message about the type of employee you're going to be. So, professional, put together, moment you drive on to that parking lot, you need to be ready. And then you do want to enter the building early, but not too early. And if you're there early, communicate with somebody to let them know, but also recognize that you're early and you're happy to wait. So it could be like, Natalie, thank you so much. I am actually interviewing with Sandy today. I know I'm a few minutes early. I just wanted to get here and check in on time. I'm going to have a seat in the lobby. Just please let me know when you're ready for me. Absolutely no rush. So, again, you just want to keep it very professional, understanding, warm. And pro tip here, I, as a hiring manager, always go back and talk with the person that greeted my candidate. So if they're in an administrative role, they're at the front desk, and that person is going to have to wait in the lobby for a little bit until I can come out and conduct the interview or take them to the interview location. I'm going to go back and have a conversation with the person that initially greeted the candidate to find out what their experience was interacting with them. I don't want them to just put on a show for me. I want to see who they truly are as they interact with other people. Let's talk about dressing the part. This is very important. So professional attire really creates that formal atmosphere. It shows that you are serious about the opportunity. So you want to dress professionally for in-person and virtual interviews, both of them. I would even tell you, even if it's a phone interview, still dress professionally. And I know that sounds silly, but it puts you in a mental state to engage in that interview in a way that isn't just casual. And sometimes we're in casual clothes, then we speak casually. So if you suit up, even if it's a phone interview, you will automatically speak more professionally. So I really encourage that. I know it seems silly, but it totally works. A little bit about colors. Neutral colors, I know they aren't super fun, they don't stand out, but you don't want to be remembered for the wrong reasons. A two-piece business suit, pants or skirt is appropriate. You want a blouse, a button-up tie, or a button-up shirt with a tie if that is appropriate for you. You want to think about the state of your shoes. Are they muddy? Do they have animal fur on them? That's how it is at my house. Unless I'm really cognizant, I make sure all of those things are clean before I walk out. Overall, you really want to make sure your clothes are well fitting. You don't want things that are baggy. You don't want things with rips in them. You don't want it to be all wrinkled. You want it to be clean. All of those things are incredibly important. And then these two kind of like sub pieces here, know the company culture. That's going to be really important in what's appropriate. You can do research about that ahead of time. I would highly encourage you to never wear cologne or perfume of any kind to an interview. Even if that's something that you feel like smells really good, you don't know if the interviewer is going to be allergic. It's just really important. That might be a smell that smells good to you and a smell that doesn't smell great to other people, and it automatically leaves them feeling un at ease. It's really important to make sure that you keep the other person in mind throughout this process. Minimal makeup, appropriate amount. You want to think about, are you prepared even though you are professionally dressed? Are you comfortable and ready to engage in whatever that interview has in store? When I was conducting interviews at a different institution, we would actually walk across campus and take that candidate to lunch with our team. And so I remember one of our candidates, she wore heels to the interview, but in her professional bag, she had a pair of flats. As soon as I said, would you like to walk or drive over to lunch? She said, I'm ready to walk over to lunch, and was able to switch out her shoes. And that just gave me such the impression that she would be ready for anything. And I really appreciated that about her. And then lastly, just limit that number of bright colored items. Again, I love color. If you ever interact with me in real life, I probably have something on that's very vibrant, and that's appropriate now that I'm in my role and really know what the culture of dress is where I work. You just want to be cognizant of that. So color is not a bad thing, but just do it in stride. So if you're a visual person, I just kind of put up on your screen two different ways to kind of see professional dress. One of them is business professional, and the other is business casual. And those could mean different things at the places where you work. So you really want to be cognizant of what that looks like. We've got this resource on our career services website under Dress for Success. So you can pull up the whole document if that would be helpful to you. All right, let's talk about what to bring. So, to the interview, you do not want to show up empty handed. There are things that you should bring and absolutely things that you shouldn't bring. So, things to bring: a notebook or a padfolio, that's that leather bound kind of document that has a pad inside that you can have information written down and something to write with. I'm going to recommend a couple of things to write with because without fail, something will stop working. Your identification. So if at checkout or at check-in they ask to see your ID to verify that you are indeed the candidate that's supposed to be interviewing. Your list of questions. We have an excellent resource on our career services website that allows you to go in and look at what are appropriate questions to ask at the end of an interview. Really important. So you're going to bring your questions with you and a bottle of water. That's also appropriate. You know, we get nervous and we have dry mouth, and so you want to have that. What you don't want to bring are giant bags or a book bag. Never a book bag. There are professional bags, there are professional messenger bags, and so take a look at what those look like. Do not bring your giant coffee with you. I understand you may have needed that. And if you were drinking that on the way to the interview, please also be cognizant of your breath. Use those breath mints. You want to come in fresh and polished. A cell phone that's going to ring or buzz throughout the interview. Just turn off the sound on your phone. It's okay for you to walk into the interview and have it, but you want to make sure there is not a single possibility that it's going to go off in the interview, and you don't want to have it sitting up on the desk while you're interviewing. Keep it in whatever bag that you brought. And you are not going to bring anybody else with you. I know it's so nice to have a support system. They're going to be there ready to cheer you on at home, but do not bring them into the interview with you. Okay, let's talk about navigation. So, interview etiquette. This is coming up, and how do you present yourself the best possible way? You're going to start off with a smile. It really warms the whole situation. You have to remember that interviewer might be nervous too. Like the person actually conducting the interview, we are looking for the right candidate. We are rooting for you to do well. But it starts with that smile, and that really sets everybody at ease. It's also introducing yourself, slowly pronouncing your first and last name, letting them know if there's a way to remember it. So, my maiden name, my last name was Wetzel, and so I would introduce myself and I would say, "Hi, I'm Natalie Wetzel, rhymes with pretzel." And so people would remember. And so if there is something that helps them understand the pronunciation of your name, you can always offer that. And again, it's a nice little icebreaker. Those things allow you to show your personality, that warmth, complimenting them on the space, or if there was something interesting in the building when you walked in, you can always note that. You want to pay attention to your body language. So you don't want to be slouching down or yawning, just showing them. And even though it's not meant to be against them, it's going to show them that you might be bored in the situation. You want to connect with the interviewer. So again, if there's an opportunity, you've done research to mention something, that is a great way to start off. You want to be cognizant of the time. So if you are scheduled for half an hour, you want to make sure that your answers are succinct, but also give the information that they might need. And you can ask at the beginning if they don't communicate how long the interview would be, but you need to frame it in the right way to say, you don't want to go, when is this interview going to be over? Like that's not going to be received well. However, you could say, I really want to be cognizant of your time. Make sure that we use our time together to the best of our capability. Could you tell me how long you have set aside for this interview today? And so that just shows that respect to them. Do not chew gum. You are not going to eat during this interview. It doesn't matter how hungry you are. You might be so nervous that you can't eat, and that's a different story, but you want to be cognizant of that. You don't want to speak poorly of the company that you're currently working with or worked with before or anybody you've worked with. So it's really important to keep it positive. You want to wrap up by thanking the interviewer for their time. That's really important. They have set that time aside from their day to interact with you. So super important. For the sample interview, the tell me about yourself, the elevator pitch, what are they really looking for? You want to make sure you are actually answering this question. It's going to be important that you know what they're asking. I think this is the question that we get the most questions about. So, the tell me about yourself, the elevator pitch. The first time I answered this question, I had no idea what they actually were looking for. And so I started talking about how I started working when I was 14 years old and all the different jobs I had. And then I talked about my hobbies, and that's not what they want to know. So, the answer to this question, what they're looking for, is your education, a very brief summary of your work history, what roles you've had, what organizations you've worked for, the skills that you developed at those organizations that you see tying directly to the work that you are interviewing for. And then also, why are you interested specifically in that role at that organization? So they're going to say, Natalie, tell me a little bit about yourself and what brings you to interview for this role today. That's what they're looking for. And the way that people phrase that question always looks different. They may say, Natalie, could you summarize your work in education history and how that connects to this position? They're still asking for the same response components. They're just phrasing it differently. So know that the first question they ask you, they're trying to set a context. It's really your hook to get them interested in all of the other experiences that you've had. So, this is a great thing for you to know because you can prepare for that. You can know what the answer is ahead of time. And so, we're going to talk about some ways that you can actually prepare for other types of questions. But this one, feeling confident when you enter into giving this response, it is going to set the tone for the whole rest of the interview. So, other types of interview questions you might get like, why are you interested in this company and position? They might tie that in with their first question about, tell me a little bit about yourself, or that might be separate. They're also going to ask you some behavioral or situational type of questions. What would you do in this scenario? If you had X happening, what actions would you take? Tell me about a time where you did X and what was the result of those actions. They may ask questions around your strengths or weaknesses, and they will want you to have questions prepared to ask of them. So I'm going to show you a trick right now. It is the most exciting thing that I have discovered in the last year or so since I've started interacting more with OpenAI and specifically ChatGPT. So I'm going to stop sharing the presentation screen and I'm actually going to share with you ChatGPT website. If you haven't heard of ChatGPT, it's really a free tool. You can create an account, but it's a free tool for you to be able to use. You don't even need to create an account in it. You can just open it up, search for ChatGPT, and stay logged out and utilize the same thing we're about to discuss. This is an incredible way for you to prepare and know what questions are going to be asked of you in a job interview. For forever, I would have people go, how do I know what questions they're going to ask me? And I would say, go back into the job description and take each one of the responsibilities or the requirements and turn that into a question that would allow you to respond and give the interviewer that answer. And I'm going to tell you what, that takes a ton of work and a ton of time. And you really want to spend the time on creating the answers. So you can go into ChatGPT and in the box under what can I help you with, you can type in what questions might be asked in an interview for the following job description. And then you're going to go to your favorite search site. So if that's Handshake, if that's Indeed, if it's LinkedIn, wherever that position is posted, and you're going to scroll down and grab the information from the job description itself. Remember, I told you you need to save that as a PDF because you always need to be able to go back and find that information to utilize. So you're going to copy that. You're going to go in ChatGPT. You're going to come after that colon where you type that question, and you're going to paste it in. And then you're going to press this little up down arrow, and that's go. And what ChatGPT will do is it will take the specific details of that job description and create a set of questions that you might be asked in the interview based on those requirements and experiences. And it breaks it down by category for you as well. So for example, tell us about yourself and why you're interested in this internship program. See, I told you, that's going to be that first question that comes out. Why did you choose to pursue a degree in finance or economics or accounting? And this is, again, specific to that job. Tell us about a time you worked as part of a team to accomplish a goal. What was your role and what was the outcome? Can you describe a situation where you had to solve a complex problem? How did you approach it? And so what's really nice under each one of these is it tells you what that hiring manager is trying to understand about you based on the question that they're asking. It gives you this amazing insider scoop. And it goes down and it will create specific job questions for that technical expertise that that job might need. And then again, it will show you what are they trying to learn from you based on that question. So then you are able to come out of that, take that information, and then actually prepare and think through the questions that you have, which is an incredible opportunity and allows you to prepare in a way that you may have never prepared before. So here we go. This is the oversight on using ChatGPT. It is an incredible tool, free at your disposal, and will absolutely change the way that you prepare for an interview. I have had countless folks try this throughout the last year, all of them coming back and saying, Natalie, I think probably 90% of the questions I was asked during the interview were ones I had prepared for using that ChatGPT method you had shared with me. So I wanted to share that with you today. Let's talk about forming your answer. So what is important about this aspect of it? You really need to listen to the question that's asked and be sure you're answering it completely. It is absolutely appropriate for you to have a document, a pad of paper in front of you during an in-person interview or a virtual or a phone interview and write down the question as it's asked. And say, can I read this back to you? I just want to make sure that I captured all the pieces of this so I can share an appropriate answer with you. Wonderful. You want to make sure you're speaking slowly and clearly. You can ask the interview to repeat the question or ask it in a different way if you're not sure what that means. It's okay if you don't have an immediate answer. You just got to take a breath and then you can say, can I have a moment to think about that? I really want to come up with a good example to share with you. Now, do you want to do that for every question they ask you? No, but is it appropriate to do throughout? Absolutely. I think one of the things that most people have a hard time talking about is really talking themselves up. That term brag, you want to share that good information with them, what your experiences are and your skills. And people feel like they're not being humble by sharing those things. But in reality, that is what they are asking you to do. You've got to be able to pull yourself out and say, here are the things that I think really make me a wonderful candidate. And one of the great methods that you can use for answering questions is called SOAR. You may have heard it called STAR. That acronym is what's the situation, what's the task, what's the action, what's the result. Another way is SOAR method. So what's the situation? What's the obstacle? What's the action that you took to overcome the obstacle? And what was the result? And so you use that acronym to think through that question, that scenario based, that situational behavioral question they ask. Tell me about a time when. What would you do if? And you can actually think through and write out what your answer would be and then determine, do you have all of those components? I would say the number one thing that people tend to not do is give the result at the end. So then you just leave the interview hanging like, but tell me how it went. Think about a stand-up comic when they get up to give their joke, they have a punchline at the end. And that punchline is what makes everybody laugh. It was what ties it all together, what brings it home. You giving them the results makes them feel the conclusion of that experience and lets them know that you were successful in navigating that situation. And I know I mentioned this before, but just remember that interviewer is a human being just like you. They might be nervous as well. So keep that in mind. Okay, you've been asked all of these questions throughout the interview, and you get to the end, and then you need to have questions prepared to ask them. I would really recommend 3 to 5 because they may answer some of the questions that you have in conversation about the position. So on your screen, you're going to see some examples of what those could look like. As I mentioned, you can go to the Career Services website in our Career Center library. We have an excellent resource called Questions to Ask at the End of the Interview, and it breaks it down between ones that would be appropriate in an internship setting and ones that would be appropriate for a full-time job role, and then you can always modify those as needed. Pro tip for this one. You are not going to talk about the salary or the benefits in that first interview with the hiring manager. You can absolutely call human resources before you have the interview and ask about the pay scale for that position. If they direct you back to the hiring manager, then you can have that conversation with them, but you don't want to have that in the interview setting itself. It's just deemed as unprofessional. You're there to share your experience and find out about the work itself, but pay is one of those things that is off the table to talk about in the interview. You will typically have that discussion with human resources when they call to make you an offer about the position itself. So something to keep in mind. Lastly, let's talk about following up after your interview. This is the thing that so many people think, okay, I'm done with the interview. That's it. That's all I have to do. That is not the case. And in any means, it's the thing that is going to set you aside from the other candidates interviewing for the same position that you are. I have heard so many employers tell me, you know what, Natalie, that thank you, that was the thing that set them apart as a candidate. So I want you to walk through these steps and think about this process in your follow-up after an interview. First of all, you want to send a thank you within 24 hours of that interview. So if you met with multiple people, you want to send individualized thank you emails if you have their contact information. You want to reference something personal that was discussed during that time. So when I say personal, I don't mean like, oh, I really loved your shoes kind of personal. I mean something that they shared with you about the work or why they enjoy being at that company, or maybe you did make a personal professional connection. Maybe you're interviewing and somehow in the conversation you got on the topic of sports and they are a Cleveland Guardians fan. And so you could mention in the follow-up thank you interview, it was so nice to talk with a fellow Guards fan about the opportunities at Medical Mutual in the interview today. I really enjoyed that connection that we made. So you can bring back in those personal pieces in that way. You want to reiterate your interest in the role in that thank you, and then send a separate thank you for each interview. So if you have multiple rounds of interview, let's say a level 1 interview, a level 2 interview, you still want to send a thank you for each of those because that's going to be a different experience and it's a different set of time that they contributed to conducting that interview. We get a question a lot about handwritten versus email thank you follow-ups. So this is some caveats to kind of think about. As far as the handwritten thank you note goes, sometimes that takes a little while to get to somebody. You put it in snail mail, The mailman delivers it. It may take a few days for it to get to them, and they may have to make a quick decision. So, asking about the timeline as one of your questions at the end of the interview can really help you make a decision about what is going to be the most appropriate method for you to follow up with. If they say, you know what, Natalie, thank you so much for your time today. We are wrapping up interviews today. We're going to have some discussions over the next few days and we will get back with you. You want to send an email follow up because that is going to get to them right away. You want to come back to the top of their mind as a possible candidate for the position. If it's something where they say, you know what, Natalie, we're going to be having interviews over the next few days and talking over the next few weeks, and we'll get back to you within 2 weeks and let you know. I would say go ahead and send that handwritten thank you card. And my best practice for this one is have your thank you cards in your vehicle. Walk out of the interview, drive away from that organization into a parking lot, maybe go into a Starbucks or sit somewhere that is going to be quiet and you can think, write out those thank you cards, put the postage on it, and drop it in the mail that day because then it's probably going to show up in 1 to 2 days after your interview. So that is really a great practice to have. And people read emails and then file them or delete them. People take cards, and I don't know if you can see on your screen, but I've got a bunch of them in my office. I hang them up, I set them out in my office. It really creates this special personal professional connection to that candidate. It really does set you apart. So just know that 2 weeks follow up is pretty standard after an interview for that employer to reach back out to you and let you know either way what their decision is. It's not unheard of to go that long. So don't panic if you haven't heard from them. And if you have had that time pass, it's okay to email them and very casually, not confrontationally, say, Natalie, I just wanted to follow up and reiterate I am still so interested in the position that we interviewed for together a couple of weeks ago. I was just checking in on your timeline on making a decision about that position. It is not aggressive. It really allows you to reiterate your interest, bring them or bring yourself to the top of mind, but maybe get some follow up that you all otherwise wouldn't have gotten. And so on your screen, you can see this is just a sample thank you letter. Again, we have these resources on our Career Services website in our Career Center library. So if you would like one, we have those available to you. You want to keep it simple, make that personal professional connection, reiterate your interest. So a few common mistakes to talk about. These are ones that we hear from employers all the time. Somebody that doesn't research the company. If they talk too quickly or too quietly, and they can't hear them, they might ask you to speak up once, but they're not going to come back and do that again. They're just going to move on with the interview. Focus on what are you trying to show them about who you are and not rambling. If you don't know what the question is asking, take a second to reread it, try to identify what they're trying to understand, and then respond appropriately. Common mistake of coming in unprofessionally dressed. I had a student once and she said, Natalie, I didn't get a call back from an interview. Can I show you what my interview attire was? I said, absolutely. She was just concerned that she wanted to check off all the boxes, really figure out why she might not have gotten that call. So from the front, she had a very nice blouse on, a skirt, appropriate shoes. She turned around and the back of her blouse was like almost an open lace fishnet kind of situation. It just was not appropriate to wear to the interview, and it probably conveyed something that she didn't want that was inappropriate for that work. And so that might be the reason she didn't get the interview. So take what you're wearing very seriously and do your very best within that. Some other things you see on your screen, you just didn't come across because of your body language that you were interested in the role at all. You may have not smiled. There may have been too much follow-up, as in you are reaching out to them once every few days. It just comes across very aggressive. It's not necessary. Bad mouthing that previous employer or employee or colleague, and then not sending that thank you. All of these are really common mistakes that now that you're aware of, you can avoid. So communication etiquette, we've got some things in here like scheduling the interview. This is part of the process. You really want to be kind and interact well with the person that is scheduling. You want to confirm what is the setting? Is it virtual? Is it in person? You want to ask who you're going to be meeting with. After the interview, if you're no longer interested in that position, please don't ghost them. You can see the little icon on your screen. Follow back up with that company and let them know that you've moved on to another opportunity, but you really appreciate them considering you. And then always write full emails addressing the person by name and signing off. Don't think about it as a text. You need to think about it as a professional letter anytime you're sending an email. So that's very important. So, just to recap, there are so many great ways for you to really nail that professional interview, and it's about knowing what to expect and really preparing well. So, research that company, prepare your route, dress the part, practice those interview questions, and after you use ChatGPT, schedule an appointment with the Career Center. Come in and do it live so we can give you direct feedback. You want to have those good questions ready for the end of the interview to ask your employer. You want to practice that good etiquette and interaction, and then you want to follow up professionally. So I hope this has helped you feel really confident in preparing for your interview. We want you to do well. We want you to nail the interview and land that job that you're looking for. And the Tri-C Career Center is always here to help. So please reach out at any point and let us know how we can assist you. Use those resources on our Career Services website, and we're excited to interact with you in the future.